Okay, well, previously, me and my friend put together a video called TFL Shutdown, in which we sarcastically sort of rebutted the whole TFL idea. We threw some gasoline onto the fire a little bit. We had our fun at your guys' expenses. Thank you for that, by the way. At any rate, we appear to have attracted a fan, TruthSeeker71, I believe the screen name is, who did hit us up with a barrage of criticisms regarding a statement that I made, having to do with the nature of biology in terms of the human mating process. Now, I would like to respond to these claims because, in all honesty, I think that this individual appears to be very knowledgeable, very intelligent. He's obviously done a whole lot of reading on this subject, and I would go so far as to say that he most likely knows more than I do on the subject. Most of what I say is sort of intuitively based, along with kind of a sprinkle of knowledge that I've acquired through a few books that I've read. But I do think that essentially what I said holds in terms of its credibility. I would at this point like to clarify what exactly I was implying with that statement. I wasn't trying to make any allusion to the way in which the mating process really works in human society. When I said that in some ways appearance can be evolutionarily adaptive, all I really meant to say was that how you look is going to essentially have an influence on how you are perceived in the society. And in that sense, if you look good, obviously that's going to be more adaptive than not looking good. I didn't try to speculate on what criteria might cause a society to deem a particular trait good, other than the fact that I suggested that there may be a degree of biological influence, something that perhaps they're influenced by. Now, in terms of the human mating process, it seems that TruthSeeker has asserted that I have attributed the role of biology a very vast space among the factors that influence the human mating process. Well, I've never claimed that biology was the sole factor or even the major factor driving the way that the human mating process functions. I never meant to say that, no. It's very obvious to me that culture plays a huge role. And I think that for the most part, TruthSeeker and I agree with one another. I think that we just sort of appear to be at cross purposes with one another as a result of a misinterpretation of a statement that I made in my previous video. One that I don't apologize for because I do think that it's true. But at any rate, I think that if he would sort of hear me out, he would probably be inclined to agree with what I'm saying. Now, as far as the role of biology is concerned in the human mating process, this is essentially what I've said, and this is how he's rebutted it. I essentially said that biology can occupy a particular space, and he sort of rebutted that with the idea of the notion that, well, if biology occupies a big space in the human mating process, then this should result in a universality of trends across cultures. Yet we're not seeing that universality, so this has to suggest that biology doesn't occupy a major role in the dating process. And that's precisely what I agree with. If biology did occupy a large role, you're right, you would see these universal trends. But I don't think that the fact that culture is the greatest influence on the human mating process completely nullifies any potential biological influence. Now, in one of my statements that I made, one of my comments that I made on our last video, TFL Shutdown, I said that in certain cultures you might see the notion of obesity being kind of stigmatized, deemed unattractive, whereas in other cultures you might see the notion of obesity as a sign of prosperity. Now, this obviously is an indicator that we're not seeing a universality of trends across cultures, buttressing his argument and also buttressing the argument that I wasn't trying to refute in the first place. Now, I'd like to sort of hone in a little bit more and examine how one might potentially acknowledge the degree to which obesity may be unhealthy or the degree to which skinniness may be unhealthy without necessarily guaranteeing a universality of trends, because I do think that a minimal role of biology can take part in this process without leading to complete predictability in terms of the designations that cultures make. Take, for example, U.S. culture. I think that we can agree on, and of course, when I make vast kind of sweeping generalizations about culture. Obviously, it's not that simple. There are subcultures, countercultures, etc. A kind of intricate array of interconnected conduits, social conduits that just complicate things a lot. So it's kind of dangerous to use the term culture at all in a very broad sense. But at any rate, for convenience sake, I'll go ahead and use the term. In American culture, in American society, I think that we can agree that obesity is a state of being, a physical state that has been stigmatized. It's deemed unattractive. Guys who are overweight tend to have a harder time finding mates because they are overweight. Now, I don't deny that the fact that obesity has been stigmatized is culturally motivated. There's no doubt that culture has made that designation. What I'm asking is what has essentially motivated to make that designation. And this is the suggestion that I would make. I would suggest that because we live in a country in which, now I don't remember the exact statistics, maybe somebody can correct me, but because we live in a country in which something like, 7 out of 10 people are obese, at any rate, a large proportion of people are obese. Yeah. Our country has had the misfortune of coming face to face with the unpleasant realities, the unpleasant health implications associated with obesity. It's a problem that we've just really come all too face to face with because of the huge proportion of Americans that are obese. So naturally, we're going to want to move in the opposite direction. I think that is just sort of a defense mechanism, really. We recognize the ill health of being obese because it's a problem that we're particularly acquainted with. So we strive for the opposite direction. Now, is it unhealthy to be too skinny? Sure it is. Is that ill health associated with skinniness something that we take into consideration? Not really, because in our socio-cultural climate, it's not a problem that is particularly impending. It's not something that's really a danger to us. So you can see a certain degree at which biology is influencing the designation that our culture is making without necessarily being too persnickety, too nitpicky. Now let's examine another culture in which obesity is considered to be a sign of prosperity. Why might obesity be a sign of prosperity in such a culture? Well, I would speculate that particularly in cultures where obesity is a physical state that people strive for, the alternative is essentially a state of malnutrition, a culture in which people are probably having a hard time.
There's no speculation that's actually true.
Yeah, I think that's pretty true. But there are cultures in which people are having issues with malnutrition, having a hard time securing food sources. So naturally, these people are on the opposite end of the spectrum. They are more acquainted with a life in which they're basically struggling to survive, and that skinniness is really an indicator that they are starving to death, that they are unhealthy. And so, like the Americans may strive for the opposite condition of obesity, they're going to strive in the other direction as well. Because obesity is not a problem that they really have in that country, so they're not all too face-to-face with the realistic implications of what being obese entails. They simply see it as moving in the opposite direction, a direction in which they're essentially allowing themselves to gravitate away from one of the key problems in their culture. So this is basically has been an attempt to illustrate how biology might. Now, keep in mind, too, that I'm not saying that everything that I'm saying is absolutely true and verifiable. A lot of it is speculation. But it has been an attempt to show how biology may play a particular limited role in the designations that cultures make without necessarily guaranteeing a universality of trends across cultures. So that's sort of been the point of this little argument. Is there anything that you wanted to add regarding things that you said on that video that you thought may need some clarifying? Or
I don't really think anything I said needed clarifying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, you stand by the things that you said.
Stand by 100%.
Okay.
If Truthseeker, in fact, wants to see the support for some of the few things I said as I was the coward in the background, still am the coward in the background, I will be happy to give you those sources. I have them. And so just hit me up whenever you want to. I was the guy you were going back and forth with most of the time. I'd be happy to present you with the sources.
Okay.
And that's all I need to say.
All right. Well, signing off. Everybody take care. Good luck dealing with your issues.